The first flakes of snow were gentle, almost apologetic as they dusted the shoulders of my coat. I watched them land and melt tiny fleeting stars against the dark wool. Inside the car, the heater hummed a warm, comforting tune that was at odds with the icy silence between us. "Elara, be reasonable." Kale's voice was a low, tense thrum, his fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the steering wheel. "It's just a ride home." I turned from the window to look at him. The profile I knew so well, the strong jaw, the slight frown of concentration, seemed like a sculpture of the man I'd married, cold and immovable. "It's not just a ride, Kale. The forecast is calling for a blizzard. They've been warning about it all day. You're going to turn around and drive directly into the worst of it." "Serafina is 5 months pregnant," he said, as if that single fact negated all others, including my safety, including the vows we'd made. "She's alone, she's scared, and her apartment is on the other side of the city. What am I supposed to do? Leave her there?" "Yes." The word burst out of me, laced with a frustration I could no longer contain. "Or call her a car." "See. Something that isn't you abandoning your wife at a bus stop in the middle of a snowstorm." I had been feeling unwell all day. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion had clung to me since morning, accompanied by dizzy spells and a persistent nausea that had me vomiting into the office bathroom sink just hours before. I'd clutched the cool porcelain, my forehead beaded with sweat, and thought about calling Kale to take me to the doctor. But I'd talked myself out of it. We were saving money, scrimping and budgeting for the future we dreamed of. A future that, in my mind, always included a child of our own. I didn't want to spend the money on a copay for what was probably just a nasty stomach bug. Now that decision felt like tragic irony. "You're a healthy, capable woman, Elara," Kale said, his tone dripping with a condescension that made me flinch. "Can you not for 1 second think of someone other than yourself? This isn't about you. It's about basic human decency." Tears pricked at my eyes, hot and shameful. I willed them back. I would not cry. I would not give him the satisfaction. Human decency? What about the decency you owe your wife? "You know I haven't been feeling well." He sighed, a long, suffering sound that suggested I was an unreasonable child interrupting his very important adult business. "If you're that unwell, get on the bus, get home and go to bed. Or go to a hospital. I'm not a doctor, Elara. What good will my presence do?" The bus stop loomed ahead, a stark plexiglass shelter looking terribly fragile against the rapidly whitening landscape. Kale pulled over with a finality that felt like a door slamming shut. "This is your stop," he said, not looking at me. A cold dread, deeper than the winter chill, seeped into my bones. "Kale, please. Don't do this. I'm begging you. Get out of the car, Elara." His voice was flat, cold. "Don't make this more dramatic than it needs to be." My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. The wind howled, snatching the door from my grip and whipping snow into my face. I clutched my thin coat around me, turning back to the car. "Kale, please." He was already shifting the gear into drive. "Serafina needs me," he said, and in that moment, I heard the unspoken end of that sentence. "More than you do." He didn't even look back. The car, my car, a sleek silver sedan that had been part of my dowry, pulled away from the curb, its tires crunching on the accumulating snow. I watched the red taillights shrink into the swirling white, 2 demonic eyes disappearing into the abyss. The chill was instantaneous. It spread from my fingertips, once warm in the car, up my arms and into the very core of me. I fumbled for my phone, my numb fingers struggling to navigate the screen. The weather alert flashed, blizzard warning in effect. "Seek shelter immediately." I hugged myself, shivering violently under the inadequate shelter of the bus stop. The world was dissolving into a monochrome fury of white and gray. Each flake felt like a tiny icy needle. The nausea I'd fought all day returned with a vengeance, churning in my stomach. I leaned against the cold glass, praying for the bus to come. When its headlights finally cut through the gloom, I nearly wept with relief. The doors hissed open and I stumbled into the crowded, stifling warmth. The air was thick with the smell of wet wool, stale breath, and the underlying scent of collective anxiety. I grabbed a handrail, my knees weak. The bus lurched forward, navigating the increasingly treacherous roads. The sharp, jerky movements intensified the sickness rolling in my gut. I closed my eyes, focusing on my breathing, on the thought of my warm bed, on the hope that Kale would be home soon, maybe even with an apology. Suddenly, the bus driver slammed on the brakes. A car had skidded through an intersection ahead. The bus tires lost their grip on the icy asphalt. I was thrown forward, my grip on the handrail torn away. I landed hard on the dirty, grated floor. A collective gasp rose from the other passengers and someone asked if I was okay. But I couldn't hear them. I couldn't feel the pain of the fall. All I felt was a sudden, excruciating and utterly terrifying agony in my abdomen. It was a pain unlike any I had ever known. A deep, wrenching internal tearing. A warm wetness seeped through my clothes. The sounds of the bus, the concerned voices, the howl of the wind, they all began to fade, growing distant and muffled as if I were sinking deep underwater. The last thing I was aware of was a faint, high-pitched buzzing in my ears, and the overwhelming, heart-shattering certainty that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Then there was nothing but cold and darkness. Consciousness returned not with a jolt, but as a slow, painful seep into awareness. The first thing I registered was the smell, a sharp antiseptic tang that stung my nostrils. Then the light, harsh fluorescent filtering through my eyelids. Finally, the feeling, a profound hollow ache that seemed to emanate from the very center of my being. I was lying in a narrow bed, stiff white sheets pulled up to my chest. The walls were a sterile, unforgiving white. A hospital. I was in a hospital. Memory flooded back in disjointed, terrifying fragments. The argument. The abandoned bus stop. The falling snow. The bus lurching. The crippling pain. My hand flew to my abdomen. It felt sore empty. A nurse in blue scrubs entered the room, her face a mask of professional neutrality. "Ah, you're awake. How are you feeling? What happened?" My voice was a raspy whisper. My stomach. There was pain. The nurse checked the 4-drip beside my bed. "You took quite a fall on the bus. The EMTs brought you in. You lost consciousness." She paused, her eyes flickering to my chart. "Mrs. Vance, were you aware that you were pregnant?" The world stopped. The hum of the hospital machinery, the distant echo of a PA system, it all faded into a deafening silence. Pregnant. The nausea. The dizziness. The exhaustion. It wasn't a stomach bug. It was pregnant. I breathed the word, my mind refusing to process it. "Approximately 8 weeks along," the nurse said, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. "The trauma from the fall, it caused significant complications." She took a deep breath. "I'm very sorry, but the fetus is no longer viable. Attempting to carry to term would pose a severe risk to your health. We need to know your wishes. Do you want us to proceed with a procedure to remove the tissue?" Each word was a hammer blow. 8 weeks. No longer viable. Remove the tissue. My child. Our child. The baby we had been saving for, dreaming of, existed and was lost in the same breath. And Kale didn't know. He was out there, driving through a blizzard, utterly oblivious to the tiny life that had been growing inside me, the life he had indirectly ended when he chose to leave me vulnerable. A sob caught in my throat, but no sound came out. The tears that finally fell were hot and silent, tracing scalding paths down my icy cheeks. I felt a pain so profound it was beyond crying, beyond screaming. It was a silent shattering of my soul. "There's no choice," I heard myself say, my voice strangely calm and detached as if it belonged to someone else. "Do the procedure." The nurse nodded, making a note on the chart. "Is there someone we can call?" "Your husband." "A family member." My husband. The man who had chosen another woman over his own wife. The man whose selfishness had led me to that bus, to that fall. Mechanically, I unlocked my phone. The screen lit up, showing a missed call from Kale and a text message. "Stuck at Serafina's. Roads are bad. Stay safe. We'll be home late. Stay safe." The irony was so brutal it was almost funny. Then my social media feed loaded. And there was a post from Serafina Lowe, glowing at the top of my feed. The caption read, "Absolute knight in shining armor. Sparkling heart, thank you, Kale, for braving the actual apocalypse to get little me and my bun home safe and sound. Didn't think I'd make it. So grateful for colleagues who become family. #BlizzardBaby #grateful." Below it was a perfectly curated photo. A bowl of steaming soup on a rustic wooden table, a pair of tiny knitted baby booties placed artfully beside it. Serafina's hand rested on her noticeably rounded belly, a diamond ring sparkling on her finger. And there, at the bottom of the post, was a glowing red heart. Liked by Kale Vance. I stared at the screen. The glowing heart seemed to pulse, searing itself onto my retinas. In that moment something inside me didn't just break. It calcified. The grief, the betrayal, the physical pain, it all coalesced into a cold, hard knot of fury in the pit of my stomach. While I was losing our child on a cold bus floor, he was liking maternity shots. While I was being rushed to the hospital, he was playing the hero for another woman. He was using my car, the car my parents had given us, to build a little domestic fantasy with his pregnant subordinate. A desperate, bitter laugh escaped my lips, startling the nurse. The sound was hollow and broken. With trembling fingers, my vision blurred by tears I refused to shed anymore, I typed a comment under Serafina's post. Wishing you both a long and happy life together. We're getting divorced tomorrow. I hit post. The words seemed to drain the last vestiges of my strength. I let the phone clatter onto the bedside table and turned my face into the thin pillow, finally allowing the silent, body-racking sobs to take over. The world I knew was gone. Everything was over. The procedure was quick and clinical. A different kind of emptiness settled in afterward. A physical echo of the emotional void that had opened inside me. The doctor used gentle, pitying words, spontaneous termination, try again when you're healed, these things happen. They felt meaningless. This didn't just happen. It was caused. I was released the next day. The blizzard had passed, leaving the city buried under a heavy, silent blanket of white. The world looked pristine and pure, a stark contrast to the ugly mess of my life. I took a taxi home, the driver navigating the slushy streets with practiced ease. The house was freezing cold and dark. Kale wasn't home. Of course he wasn't. He was probably still playing house with Serafina, unaware that his own had crumbled to dust. I didn't turn on the lights. I dragged my heavy, aching body up the stairs and into our bedroom. The room still smelled like him. His cedarwood cologne, his laundry detergent. Made my stomach turn. I pulled the thick down comforter from the bed, wrapped it tightly around my shivering body, and collapsed into a ball on the floor, trying desperately to absorb some semblance of warmth. The physical cold was nothing compared to the ice that had encased my heart. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew the front door was being slammed open with such force that the walls shook. Alara. What the hell is wrong with you? Kale's voice roared through the silent house, filled with a fury I had never heard directed at me before. His footsteps pounded on the stairs. He appeared in the bedroom doorway, his tie loosened and disheveled, his face a dark mask of anger. What was that? He demanded, storming into the room. That comment. You deliberately humiliated me in front of my entire team. My phone has been blowing up all night. Wrapped in the blanket, I didn't move. I simply watched him, this stranger I had married, as he raged. His anger seemed to grow in the face of my silence. It's giving a pregnant colleague a ride home. Do you have to be so pathologically jealous? So dramatic? Everyone at the company knows about Serafina's situation. She needs extra help. Can't you be understanding for once? Is it really worth trying to destroy my reputation over something so trivial? Every word was a shard of glass. For 3 years this man had been my best friend, my lover, my partner. He had been gentle, funny, supportive. Now he was a venomous stranger, accusing me of pettiness, all to defend another woman. A chill shot from my feet straight to my heart. I clenched my fists under the blanket, my nails digging half-moons into my palms. I took a deep, shaky breath, struggling to keep my voice level. Jealous? Kale was a blizzard. I just asked you for a ride home. Was that so difficult? I'm your wife. How many times do I have to say it? It's not about helping a colleague. It's about you abandoning me. He threw his hands up in exasperation. It's colleagues helping each other out. God's Alara, I remember you weren't like this before. You used to be compassionate. The words tore out of me before I could stop them. I'm pregnant too. The room went utterly silent. My face was deathly pale, my stomach churning. Kale stood frozen for a second, then let out a harsh, dismissive scoff. What now? What kind of sympathy ploy is this? I raised my head and stared at him, my eyes dry and cold. A ploy? Do you really think I'm that pathetic? Let me tell you, the baby is gone. I lost it on that bus while you were busy playing hero for another woman. He stared at me, his expression shifting from anger to confusion to outright disbelief. Stop lying. Just because I refuse to drive you, you start making up stories? Baby, Where did you get a baby from? If you were really pregnant, you should be more considerate of Serafina. She's a pregnant woman with limited mobility. Why are you picking fights with her?" His tone was icy, devoid of any concern, filled only with endless, baseless accusation. He didn't believe me. He thought I was a liar, a schemer so consumed by jealousy that I would fabricate a pregnancy. Tears I thought I'd exhausted finally streamed down my face, hot and furious. "In your mind, is this really the kind of person I am?" Before he could answer, his phone rang. The screen lit up with the name Serafina Lowe. I could picture her perfectly with her wide, innocent eyes and her sickly sweet voice. Kale's entire demeanor changed. The anger melted into a cloying softness. He pressed the answer button. "Sarah? Everything okay?" Her voice, tinny and audible from where I sat, oozed through the speaker. "Kale, is Alara okay? I heard she's really angry. Don't take it to heart. She's just passionate. She definitely still loves you." Even through the phone I could smell the manipulative stench of her words. "Don't you defend her," Kale said, his voice dripping with a tenderness he'd just denied me. "I've spoiled her rotten. Throwing a tantrum over nothing." He paused, listening. "Don't worry about this. You go to sleep. You're carrying a child after all." He hung up gently and turned back to me, the impatience instantly back in his eyes. "See? That's understanding. I'll sleep in the study tonight. You should really think about what you've become." He turned to leave. I closed my eyes, took the deepest breath of my life and let it out slowly. When I opened them, my voice was terrifyingly calm. "Kale." He paused at the door, not turning around. "We're getting a divorce." He froze, then slowly turned, a mocking laugh on his lips. "Divorce? What are you making a fuss about now? My patience has its limits. Is this really necessary?" "It doesn't matter what you think is necessary," I said, my tone steady, each word a nail in the coffin of our marriage. "Let's get a divorce." For the first time he looked genuinely caught off guard, seeing the absolute, unshakable resolve in my eyes. The laughter died in his throat. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He simply stared, and then with a shake of his head he left, slamming the study door behind him. I was alone again. But this time the silence felt like power. The silence after Kale's departure was profound. It wasn't the empty silence of abandonment. It was a fertile quiet, filled with the grim purpose of survival. I stayed on the floor, wrapped in the comforter, until the first gray light of dawn filtered through the windows. Then I moved. Called my best friend Lyra. Her voice, sharp and full of life, was a balm on my shattered nerves. "Alara? Sweetie, are you okay? I saw your comment on that witch's post. What's happening?" The story tumbled out of me in a raw, broken stream. The abandonment, the miscarriage, the hospital, Kale's cruel disbelief. Lyra listened, her intermittent gasps and muttered curses a soundtrack to my grief. "That absolute bastard," she seethed when I finished. "Alara, you were a fool for him. You gave up that promotion at EtherTech for his career. You left the company so you wouldn't be his competition. And now he gets a little power, a little title, and he's screwing his subordinate? I always knew he was an insecure little weasel." He was right. The memories, now viewed through the lens of his betrayal, took on a new, sinister hue. I had been a rising star at EtherTech, a tech firm where we both worked. Kale had always been slightly in my shadow. He'd said he felt emasculated, that it would be better for our relationship if I took a step back. He'd promised he would succeed for both of us. So I'd voluntarily stepped down, handed my projects over to him, and taken a mundane, low-pressure clerical job to support our home life. The dowry car from my parents had become his commuter vehicle. My ambition had been willingly shelved for his ego. And this was my reward. "Lyra," I said, my voice hardening, "I need you to do something for me. Anything. Name it. I'll key his car myself. No. I need information. Everything you can find on them at the company. I'm not just leaving this marriage. I'm going to burn it all down." Lyra, who worked in HR and was the unofficial gossip hub of EtherTech, didn't hesitate. "Consider it done. Those two are hardly discreet. It's an open secret. Everyone knows but you, sweetie. They all thought you knew and were turning a blind eye." The next few days were a blur of sterile routine and gathering storm clouds. I took a week off from my job, citing a medical emergency. The house remained empty. Kale didn't come to see me, didn't call to check if I was alive. In the past, after any argument, he would always leave a little magnet on the fridge with a silly drawing or a sweet note. This time the fridge was bare and cold. The message was clear. Despite it being an early miscarriage, the doctor had warned me to take it easy. The emotional and physical trauma required proper healing. Suppressing the deep bitterness, I forced myself to eat, to sleep, to function. One afternoon, feeling a little stronger, I went back to the hospital for a follow-up appointment. The waiting room was warm and filled with the soft, hopeful chatter of expectant couples. I kept my head down, trying to ignore the painful reminders of what I had lost. Then I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. It was Kale's, but it was a version of his voice I hadn't heard in years. Light, joyful, adoring. "Sarah, look at this one. So tiny. Can you believe something that small will be ours?" I looked up, my heart hammering against my ribs. There they were. Kale had his arm around Serafina, pointing at a tiny, ridiculously expensive-looking cashmere baby sweater in a maternity store catalog. She was beaming, her hand resting possessively on her belly. "Ours?" The word echoed in my head, sucking all the air from the room. What did he mean, ours? "The doctor said the baby is growing so well," Serafina chirped. "I think it might be a boy. I hope he has your eyes." "Boy or girl, it's all good," Kale said, kissing her temple. "My parents said they'll come take care of you after you give birth." I felt as if I'd been struck by lightning. His parents. They'd always been distant with me, subtly pressuring me about grandchildren. Now they were eagerly awaiting the birth of their son's illegitimate child with his mistress. Kale looked up and saw me. The smile on his face vanished, replaced by a panicked guilt that quickly morphed into defensive anger. He stiffened. "Alara? What are you doing here?" His eyes dropped to the medical folder in my hand. Were you really pregnant?" I clenched the test report so tightly the paper crumpled. The physical pain was nothing. "Does it matter?" I retorted, my voice like ice. I turned my gaze to Serafina. "Congratulations." She had the audacity to look sympathetic. "Thank you, Alara. I wasn't feeling well today, so I asked Kale to bring me for a checkup. Please don't misunderstand." "Misunderstand?" I let out a cold, mirthless laugh. What would I need to misunderstand? Kale stepped forward, his face dark with displeasure. "Alara, what kind of attitude is that? I thought you had some time to reflect." "What attitude, Kale?" I struggled to keep my voice low to not cause a scene, but the rage was a living thing inside me. "You drive her home, you accompany her to prenatal appointments. Do you think I'm an idiot?" Serafina shrank behind him, playing the victim perfectly. "Kale, she's so scary. She might upset the baby." "Don't be afraid, Sarah," he cooed to her before turning back to me, his eyes filled with pure disgust. "Enough. Are you stalking me now? What do you want to know?" "Whether the child is mine." His tone was a challenge. "So what if it is? I felt a little guilty towards you before, but seeing how jealous and unhinged you are, I know I made the right choice." The admission, so casual and cruel, was the final nail. This child was indeed his. Emboldened by his favor, Serafina shed her meek facade. She stroked her belly arrogantly. "Kale doesn't just give me rides. He walks with me, brings me lunch, won't even let me take the subway. He says only talentless women squeeze onto public transport." I looked from her smug face to his defiant one. A strange calm descended over me. The grief and anger solidified into a single, diamond-hard point of resolution. "If you want this man," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "you can have him. But my money? My car? Don't even dream of getting a single cent." I locked eyes with Kale. "The car is mine. Hand over the keys. Now." He stared, dumbfounded. I held out my hand, unwavering. "You're being ridiculous," he spluttered. "Now," I repeated, my voice leaving no room for argument. Flustered and under the gaze of other people in the waiting room, he fumbled in his pocket and slapped the keys into my palm. I didn't look back. I turned and walked away, the keys digging into my flesh, my head held high. The battle lines were drawn. The war had begun. The first thing I did when I got home was open every window. The stench of him, of his betrayal, had to be purged. Then I started with the closet. I pulled out armfuls of his expensive suits, his crisp dress shirts, his collection of silk ties. I didn't fold them. I threw them into black garbage bags. I moved to his dresser, dumping drawers of socks, underwear, and workout clothes. I gathered his prized possessions. The limited edition sneakers he'd waited in line for hours to buy, the vintage watch his father gave him, his high-end gaming console and collection of games. All of it went into the bags. I was a woman possessed, fueled by a cold, cleansing fury. For 3 years I had built a life around this man, curating this home for us. Now I was systematically erasing him from it. This house was mine, purchased with my savings before the marriage. He hadn't contributed a single penny to the down payment or the mortgage. He had no claim here. He had no right to strut around here with his pregnant mistress while I bled and mourned in silence. After exhausting myself for hours, I collapsed onto the sofa amidst a sea of filled trash bags. The physical exertion had been cathartic. For the first time I could breathe. The suffocating weight of the past 3 years, of dimming my own light to make his seem brighter, was lifting. My phone rang. It was Kale. I declined the call and blocked his number. Immediately, another number flashed on the screen. I answered, my voice weary. What? Elara, have you lost your mind? He screamed, his voice raw with anger. You threw all my things out. Do you have any idea how much that stuff cost? I actually laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Cost? You know what's expensive, Kale? My youth. My career. My child. You took them all and treated them like bargain bin trash. Stop being unreasonable, he yelled. Serafina is pregnant. Her emotions are fragile. I can't have her upset. So I'm supposed to suffer so you can pamper your mistress and your bastard child? The words were venomous. I felt no guilt saying them. Elara, don't push me. Who do you think you are? If it weren't for me. I cut him off. If it weren't for you, Kale, I'd be a director at EtherTech by now. Listen carefully. We are done. Go be with whoever you want. This house is mine. Don't come back. I hung up and blocked that number too. I powered off my phone. The silence was finally, truly mine. The next morning I went to a law firm. The consultation was straightforward. The house and the car, both premarital assets in my name, were unequivocally mine. The rest was just negotiation. There was nothing to negotiate. He would leave with nothing but the clothes on his back, and those were currently in trash bags on my floor. I called Lyra. Viv, I need the ammunition. She worked fast. Within hours my email was flooded with evidence. Photos of them holding hands in the parking garage. Security camera timestamps showing them entering and leaving meeting rooms together long after hours. Gossipy chat logs from colleagues. And most damningly, project reports clearly showing that the work Kale had used to secure his last 2 promotions, work that had impressed the senior partners, was in fact mine. He had repackaged my ideas, my strategies, and presented them as his own after I left the company. They had been an open secret. Hugging, flirting, even carrying on in the company break room. They used business trips as romantic getaways. The whole department knew, but out of some misplaced loyalty or fear of Kale's position, had kept it from me. He's not even that capable, Lyra said, her scorn palpable. He rode your coattails straight to the middle and now he's crashing. My hand tightened around my mouse. All my hard work, my sacrificed ambition had been his stepping stone. I compiled everything into a devastatingly clear PowerPoint presentation. I included side-by-side comparisons of my original project notes and his final winning presentations. I included the photos, the timestamps, the chat logs. At the end I added a single stark slide. EtherTech's values. Meritocracy or nepotism and fraud. I sent it to Lyra. The main company group chat. Now. The effect was instantaneous. My phone, which I'd turned back on, began buzzing incessantly with notifications from former colleagues. The group chat exploded. Lyra called me, her voice giddy with vindication. Elara, it's chaos. Absolute chaos. The PPT is legendary. HR and the senior partners have called them into a closed-door meeting. Their reputations are toast. They'll be cleaning out their desks by tomorrow. As predicted, by the end of the day, Kale and Serafina were officially terminated for gross misconduct and violation of company ethics policies. But it wasn't enough. I opened my laptop again. I drafted a new, concise email. In the recipient field, I entered the addresses of every client Kale had ever worked with, every headhunter in the industry, and the senior executives of every competing firm in the city. The subject line was, Public notice regarding former EtherTech manager Kale Vance. The attachment contained the most damning photos and a summary of the project plagiarism. I hit send. Within hours, the industry blacklist was in effect. Lyra confirmed it. No one will touch him, Alara. He's radioactive. He's finished. Kale, now jobless and with a reputation in tatters, had nowhere to go but Seraphina's small rented apartment. I heard through the grapevine that the shine was wearing off their little fantasy rather quickly. The knight in shining armor was now just an unemployed, disgraced man sulking on her couch. The reckoning was complete. I had taken back my narrative, my pride, and my future. All that was left was to make it official. The fallout from the email was swift and absolute. Lyra kept me updated with a steady stream of satisfying news. Kale's name was Mud. Recruiters wouldn't return his calls. Former clients sent terse emails distancing themselves. He was utterly unemployable in his field. With no income and no prospects, he was forced to fully move into Seraphina's cramped apartment. Lyra reported with gleeful schadenfreude that the domestic bliss was already fraying. Turns out the dream guy isn't so dreamy when he's moping around all day, using your Netflix password and eating your food. Lacey Jew, sorry Seraphina, is apparently not thrilled to be the sole breadwinner for her knight in tarnished armor. I felt a petty thrill at the news, but it was short-lived. The battle wasn't over. It was just changing fronts. A few days later, as I was leaving for a follow-up doctor's appointment, I found my front door vandalized. Splashed across the white paint in garish blood-red letters were the words, "Gold digger and husband stealer." The pungent smell of spray paint filled the air, turning my stomach. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. Sure enough, as I stood there, frozen in disgust, Kale's parents emerged from a beat-up sedan parked down the street. They marched toward my doorstep like two avenging angels of pettiness, their faces set in grim, entitled lines. His mother, Moira Vance, was the first to speak, her voice a shrill weapon in the cold morning air. "You cruel, heartless girl. How could you? On such a cold day you made our son homeless." I tightened my coat around me, the chill seeping deep into my bones. "Of course," I said, my voice laced with icy sarcasm. "Your son is the victim here. Sleeping in his mistress's cozy nest while I recover from losing his child. How could I forget? You're so looking forward to taking care of her during her confinement. How is it you're suddenly concerned about his homelessness?" Her face purpled with rage. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at me. "So what if that's the case? You useless girl. 3 years of marriage and not a single grandchild for us. Nothing to show for it. And you have the nerve to keep my son's house?" The song family line must continue. "The child in that girl's belly is a boy. Precious air. A woman like you deserves to be shunned." Spittle flew from her mouth as her voice rose to a hysterical pitch. I took a step back, revolted. His father, Gerald, a usually silent man, chimed in, his voice a low grumble. "Exactly. No manners. Your parents raised you with no respect. My son provided for you, gave you a good life, and this is how you repay him? Where is your conscience? You will transfer the property to him. No. Consider it compensation for our family." I looked at their twisted, greedy faces and felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't about justice or family. This was pure, unadulterated extortion. They saw me as an obstacle to their sons' and their future grandsons' comfort, and they were here to remove me. I didn't argue. I didn't engage. I simply pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Hello, yes. I'd like to report trespassing, malicious vandalism, and threats at my home address." The police arrived quickly. The Vance's bluster evaporated in the face of uniformed authority. They were led away, sputtering protests, and shoved into the back of a squad car. Watching them go, I felt a fierce, primal surge of satisfaction. That evening, I received a call from the police station. They were requesting my presence. When I arrived, I saw Moira and Gerald sitting on a hard bench, their defiance replaced by a sullen, panicked stiffness. The officer in charge explained they were being held on misdemeanor charges. He asked if I wished to press charges or seek a private settlement. I looked directly at the two people I had once called Mom and Dad. "I want to press charges for trespassing and criminal mischief. I will not be settling privately." You wicked girl." Moira shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me from across the room. I met her gaze without flinching. There is a high-definition security camera right above my front door. Captured every second of your little art project. The evidence is undeniable. And if you continue to slander me in a police station, I will add defamation to the list of charges. Moira Vance's face went ashen. She slumped back in her chair, her bravado utterly deflated. The crime was committed by your son, I said, my voice cold and clear in the sterile room. Not by me. If he hadn't chosen to cheat, I would still be respectfully calling you mom and dad. Those down jackets you're wearing? I went to 3 different malls last winter to find the right ones. They cost over $3,000. For 3 years I gave you my heart. And you repay me with red paint and curses. Why should I swallow that? The police officers were silent, listening. The Vances had no rebuttal. They were caught, exposed, and pathetic. It was at that moment that Kale arrived, rushing into the station looking harried and desperate. The moment he saw me, he did the unthinkable. He fell to his knees on the cold linoleum floor with a loud thud. Alara, please. I'm begging you, he cried, his face contorted in a performance of grief. Let my parents go. I know I was wrong. I want a divorce. I'll do it right now. I'll agree to whatever terms you say. I won't make a scene anymore. As he spoke, he began slapping himself hard across the face, the sharp cracks echoing in the room, a grotesque pantomime of remorse. I watched him, feeling nothing but a bottomless, weary disgust. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he was facing consequences. He was sorry his parents had been caught. To expedite the process, to finally be free of this toxic family forever, I agreed not to press charges against his parents. My lawyer, who I had called the moment I left the house, arrived with the divorce papers. I had Kale sign them right there in the police station waiting room, under the fluorescent lights and the watchful eyes of the officers. He scrawled his name without another word of argument, his head bowed, the picture of defeated shame. It was over. The siege had ended. I had held my ground and I had won. Holding the divorce certificate felt surreal. It was just a piece of paper, a formal declaration from the state that a union once sanctified by love and promise was now legally null and void. But its weight was immense. It represented the end of a 3-year chapter of my life, one that had shattered in the most brutal way imaginable. To say I felt nothing would be a lie. A deep, resonant sadness lingered, not for the man Kale had become, but for the man I'd thought he was, for the future we'd planned, for the innocent child who would never be. But overwhelming that sadness was a profound sense of relief. The constant anxiety, the walking on eggshells, the feeling of being second best. It was all gone. A long agony was indeed worse than a short one. The pain of the cut was sharp, but the festering wound was now clean. That night, Lyra came over with a bottle of expensive tequila and a tub of ice cream. We sat on the floor of my now spotless living room, surrounded by the bags of Kale's belongings destined for the dumpster. To freedom, Lyra said, clinking her shot glass against mine. To freedom, I echoed, and the liquor burned a clean, fiery path down my throat, scorching away the last remnants of the past. Men, Lyra declared, already a little slurred, are overrated. Trash. The lot of them. Don't waste another tear on that asteroid. I've got your back from now on. I laughed, a genuine free sound that felt foreign in my own ears. Asteroid. Yeah, 'cause he's a dense rock that crashed into your life and caused mass extinction, she said deadpan. Then she grinned. But look. New life. Defines a way. You're the mammal now, Alara. Small, smart, and you're gonna inherit the earth. I laughed until I cried, and for the first time the tears felt cleansing, not destructive. The next day I called my parents. I had been dreading this, expecting disappointment or worse, and I told you so. My mother had never been Kale's biggest fan, finding him charming but insubstantial. Mom, I have something to tell you, I began, my voice shaky. Kale and I, we're getting a divorce. There was a pause on the other end. Then my mother's voice, soft and firm. Oh, sweetheart. We know. You do. Lyra may have given us a heads up, my dad chimed in, his voice a low, comforting rumble. Alara, we never thought that boy was right for you. But you were so in love and we wanted to support your happiness. We're not disappointed in you, my mother added, her voice thick with emotion. We're heartbroken for you. But we are so proud of you for leaving. Come home, darling. Just for a little while. Let us take care of you. I broke down then, great heaving sobs of relief. Their unconditional support was a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. I was so foolish. I'm so sorry. Hush now, my dad said. No apologies. You loved. There's no shame in that. The shame is on the one who didn't know how to cherish it. Live well now. That's all we want for you. We're always in your corner. I took a week and went home. I slept in my old room, ate my mother's cooking and went for long, quiet walks with my father. I didn't talk much about what happened and they didn't press. Their quiet, steadfast presence was the medicine I needed. I recharged, rediscovering a version of myself that existed before Kale, a version that was stronger and more resilient. When I returned to the city, the snow had melted and the first brave buds of spring were appearing on the trees. It felt symbolic. A new beginning. I walked into my dull, unchallenging clerical job and handed in my resignation. My manager was surprised but wished me well. 3 years of marriage had drained my passion and ambition. It was time to reclaim them. I updated my resume, highlighting the high-powered projects I'd led at EtherTech before my hiatus. The gap in my employment was harder to explain, but I framed it as a sabbatical for personal development. My skills were still sharp and my reputation from my EtherTech days, it turned out, still held some weight. I landed an interview at a dynamic new media company for a role in live streaming operations. It was a chaotic, fast-paced world, the polar opposite of my previous quiet job. The interview was tough, grilling me on metrics, engagement strategies, and crisis management. For the first time in years, my brain fired on all cylinders. I was hungry for it. I got the job. The work was exhausting, often stretching late into the night. But it was deeply, profoundly fulfilling. I was learning, creating, and building again. Within months, I had streamlined their operations, signed several key influencers, and increased viewer engagement by a significant margin. Business negotiations came one after another. I was good at this. I had forgotten how good it felt to be competent, to be valued for my mind and my drive, not my ability to keep a quiet home. I was building a new life, a better one on my own terms. The ghost of Kale Vance was finally being overwritten by the reality of Alara Vance, the person I was always meant to be. Work had temporarily settled into a manageable rhythm. The frantic launch phase was over and my new operation was running smoothly. I finally had a chance to catch my breath. I arranged to meet Lyra at a quiet cafe we both loved, a place with big windows and excellent coffee. She was already there when I arrived, waving from a corner table. She looked me up and down as I sat, a wide grin spreading across her face. Look at you, boss lady. You're glowing. I told you. Mammals inherit the earth. I laughed, ordering a cappuccino. It's good to see you, Viv. It's been a crazy few weeks. Good crazy by the looks of it, she said, sipping her latte. So, Phil, how is the new world order? It's amazing, I said and realized I truly meant it. Exhausting but amazing. I feel like myself again. More than myself, actually. That's what I like to hear, Lyra said, her expression softening. Then she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. So, the reason we're really here. Do you want to know? About the asteroid. I stirred my coffee, watching the foam swirl. Did I? The lingering resentment was still there, a small, dark ember. But it was no longer a fire that consumed me. Now it was just curiosity. I suppose it's the natural epilogue, I said, looking up at her. Go on. Lyra's eyes sparkled with the thrill of a master gossip delivering a particularly juicy update. Hey. Well, he's having a spectacularly terrible time. Couldn't get a job here, obviously. His reputation is hotter than a dumpster fire. So he had to slink back to his hometown with his tail between his legs to live off his parents. I raised an eyebrow. Serafina went with him? Can you believe it? Lyra said, wide-eyed. She actually followed him. I heard his parents initially treated her like a queen, the precious vessel carrying their male heir. But Lyra's expression turned grim. Not long after she gave birth, the novelty wore off. The Song family charm must not extend to postpartum care. From what I hear, they've got her doing everything. Laundry, cooking, cleaning. Apparently they even have a small farmette. She's feeding chickens and pigs. A small, involuntary shudder went through me. The thought of Serafina, who prized her delicate, pampered image, mucking out a pigsty, was a bizarre and jarring image. But that's not the worst of it, Lyra said, her voice dropping even lower. The baby, There was a high fever. Really bad. And the parents, with their old-school rural superstitions, refused to take it to a hospital right away. They tried some home remedies, prayers. By the time they finally caved and got real medical help, it was too late. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, too late? Brain damage, Lyra whispered, her face somber. The fever was too high for too long. The child, it will have special needs for life. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. All the anger, the bitterness I felt toward them, suddenly felt insignificant. Oh my God, I breathed. That's horrible. The child was the only truly innocent one in this entire sordid mess. Its life had begun with a catastrophic failure from every adult responsible for it. I know, Lyra said quietly. It's awful. What about Kale? I asked, my voice hollow. He couldn't have just stood by and let that happen. Lyra snorted, the moment of gravity passing. What could he do? He's a broken man, Lyra. He's up to his eyeballs in debt. When his kid got sick, all he was qualified to do was haul bricks at a local construction site. And get this, she couldn't help a smirk. The little prince broke his leg within 3 days. Too soft for manual labor. I covered my mouth, a mixture of horror and morbid fascination holding me captive. So now, Lyra concluded, the whole family is relying on Serafina to keep them afloat. The woman who was too delicate for the subway is now the sole caretaker for a special needs child, a crippled husband, and 2 elderly in-laws who probably treat her like a servant. How's that for a plot twist? She sat back, letting the full, tragic picture sink in. I was silent for a long time, watching the people outside the cafe window go about their lives. They had gotten everything they wanted. Each other, the baby, the involvement of his parents. And it had become their own personal hell. Kale's weakness, Serafina's manipulation, his parents' ignorance. It had all combined into a perfect storm of misery. They say only the wicked can torment the wicked, I said finally, my voice soft. Let them drown in each other. There was no schadenfreude left in me. Only a deep, abiding sense of having narrowly escaped a similar fate. Thankfully I had cut my losses. My path had been painful, but it was clean. Theirs was a tangled, hopeless snarl. Lyra reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You got out. That's all that matters. I smiled at her, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I did. I took a last sip of my coffee. And now it's time I got on with my perfect life. The past was a closed book. A sad, painful story, but one with an ending. My story was just beginning. I paid the bill, linked my arm through Lyra's, and we stepped out of the cafe into the bright, hopeful sunshine of a new day. The end.